The rope cut into Clara's neck, her small body dangling from the cottonwood branch as her lungs screamed for air. Darkness crept at the edges of her vision, while Copper Canyon's townsfolk watched a sea of grim faces distorted by drought-fueled hatred and fear. "Let the witch hang." Hargrove bellowed, his massive frame commanding the mob's attention. Sweat glistened on his florid face despite the pre-dawn chill. Her curse dies with her. Clara's fingers clawed feebly at the noose as consciousness began to fade. No sound escaped her constricting throat, not from the hanging, but from the silence that had defined her 12 years of life. The crude wooden sign she'd used for begging food, scrawled in charcoal, lay trampled in the dust beneath her kicking feet. Through darkening vision, she spotted something the others hadn't: a silver flash of movement on the saloon roof. Sheriff Wilson's rifle barrel caught the first ray of sunrise as he took careful aim. The crack of the shot coincided with searing pain as the bullet severed the rope inches above her head. Clara plummeted to the ground, impact driving the last oxygen from her lungs as the crowd recoiled in confusion. "Step away from the girl." Wilson's voice thundered from above. He stood silhouetted against the dawn sky, rifle reloaded and aimed at Hargrove's chest. "The next bullet won't hit rope." Clara's vision swam her body, instinctively curling into a protective ball as she gasped desperately for air. Her fingertips pressed against the ground, and something responded, a faint vibration beneath the earth water, stirring in hidden channels deep below, almost as if reaching back to her touch. Hargrove recovered first, his calculated rage, finding a new target. Taking the witch's side. "Wilson, always suspected you weren't one of us. What I'm against is murdering children without trial." Wilson replied, descending the saloon stairs with his rifle trained steadily. "Especially when the water ran clear, until you started selling barrels from your private supply at 5 times the normal price." A dangerous stillness fell over the crowd. Several men shifted uncomfortably, doubt creeping into their expressions. "She'll bewitch you too." Hargrove snarled, desperation edging his voice. "Look at her unnatural, mute devil child. The day after she's seen at our well, the water turns black as pitch." Wilson reached Clara's side, positioning himself between her and the mob. "Funny timing," he said coldly. "Water goes bad just when you're positioned to profit. Almost like someone knew exactly when to add copper sulfate to the town well." Clara felt a different presence approaching, silent, purposeful movement behind the livery stable. An elderly Apache woman caught her eye and made a subtle motion toward the narrow gap between buildings. Hargrove's hand slid toward his holster. "Careful, Sheriff. Folk might wonder whose side you're really on." "I'm on the side of justice." Wilson replied, not missing the movement. His eyes narrowed. "Deputy Mills will escort Clara to the jail until the circuit judge arrives next week. She'll get a fair—" 3 things happened simultaneously. Hargrove drew his revolver with startling speed. Wilson fired a shot that knocked the weapon from his hand. And Clara, summoning strength born from pure survival instinct, rolled beneath the nearest wagon and scrambled toward the shadowed alley. "She's escaping," someone shouted as chaos erupted. "After her." Hargrove bellowed, clutching his bleeding hand. $100 to whoever brings me the witch's head." Clara's rope-burned throat felt like fire as she ran, legs trembling beneath her. The elderly Apache woman materialized from the shadows, seizing her arm with surprising strength. "Run, Waterfinder," she whispered in accented English, pushing Clara toward the town's edge. "Nahuel waits. Death walks too close to you today." Behind them, another gunshot split the air as Wilson held off the mob, buying precious seconds for Clara's escape. Blood from her neck soaked into her tattered dress collar. But she ran as she'd never run before the strange vibration beneath her feet, growing stronger with each desperate stride toward the wilderness beyond Copper Canyon's boundaries. From the shadows of a jagged outcropping, Nahuel watched with the unblinking intensity of a hawk, The Apache scout had witnessed many cruelties in his 40 winters cavalry massacres, treaties penned in promises and torn with lies, seasons when his people's children withered from thirst, while white settlers diverted ancient waterways. He recognized the moment when fear transforms humans into monsters. Will grandmother reach her in time? Lila asked his 14-year-old daughter, shifting anxiously beside him. Nahuel remained motionless, only the slight tightening of his knife grip betraying his tension. The unexpected gunshots had altered everything, the sheriff's intervention creating chaotic possibility, where before there had been only certain death. Now there, Lila whispered, pointing toward movement at the eastern edge of town. Two figures emerged between buildings, one tall and straight, the other small and stumbling, red marks vivid around her neck, even at this distance. Elderly Hawk guided Clara with practiced urgency toward their position. 3 armed men follow. Nahuel observed with clinical detachment, noting the townsfolk breaking away from the main confusion. Prepare the horses. Clara reached them moments before discovery, collapsing at Nahuel's feet with chest heaving and eyes wild. Blood trickled from where the rope had sliced her skin, but what struck Nahuel most was the girl's expression, not just fear, but fury and determination beyond her years. The waterfinder, elderly Hog, confirmed her wrinkled face grave. She was moments from joining the ancestors. Nahuel assessed Clara with a penetrating glance. I saw you 3 days ago by the dry creek bed, he said in careful English. Your fingers read the earth like our people read the stars. You found water where there was none. Clara stared up at him, struggling to comprehend through her pain and panic. Our spring dies, Nahuel continued with brutal directness. Our children grow weak. We need your gift. He gestured toward the approaching search party now visible at the town's edge. They need your death. Choose quickly, come with us, and live or stay and die. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Clara glanced back at Copper Canyon, the only home she'd known now, turned murderously against her then, to the unfamiliar Apache faces before her. With surprising clarity, she nodded once and stood on trembling legs. Good. Nahuel lifted her onto his horse in a single fluid motion. Now we disappear. Jake Turner lowered his brass spyglass, a predator's smile creasing his filthy beard. The ridge above town offered perfect surveillance of the failed lynching and unexpected escape. What interested him most wasn't the mob or Wilson's intervention, but the Apache involvement specifically. Which Apache? Nahuel himself, he muttered, watching the small party vanish into the scrubland. Worth knowing. Turner had history with the Apache scout 3 years ago. Nahuel had tracked Turner's party after they raided a small settlement, eventually costing Turner 2 men and a profitable hostage. The debt of blood remained unpaid. But something else caught his attention, the way Hargrove had focused on the mute girl with unnatural intensity. Not just hatred, but desperation. A man like Hargrove didn't expend such effort without substantial reward at stake. Turner packed his spyglass and moved toward his waiting horse mind, calculating angles that connected profit to revenge. The drought had made men desperate. Desperate men paid premium rates for the right information. And information flowing to the right ears could settle old scores while filling empty pockets. $1,000. Hargrove stated flatly, sliding a leather pouch across his polished desk. The coins landed with significant weight before Turner. The trapper's filthy fingers remained motionless. Information like mine sets its own price. He countered, nostrils flaring at the implied insult. Especially when it concerns both your water problem and the Apache who's harboring your witch girl. Hargrove's eyes narrowed dangerously. You know, Nahuel, we have history. Turner replied unconsciously, touching the twisted scar running from ear to collarbone, Nahuel's parting gift from their last encounter. He's not just any Apache. He's their best water finder until now. His gaze sharpened. Which makes me wonder why you want the girl dead rather than working for you. She's got the same gift, doesn't she? Something shifted in Hargrove's expression, a calculated reassessment. He rose from his desk and moved to the window overlooking Copper Canyon's main street, where townsfolk lined up at his water wagons, exchanging dwindling coins for what had once flowed freely. 2,000. Hargrove offered without turning. Final price. Turner chuckled, the sound like stones grinding bones. First tell me why a mute orphan girl rates such generous bounty. Then I'll decide what my information's truly worth. A dangerous silence stretched between them, before Hargrove turned, studied Turner for a long moment, then reached into his desk. He withdrew not more money, but a surveyor's map, unfolding it with deliberate precision. This parcel, he said, jabbing a thick finger at land marked in red. 20 acres of Upper Canyon, worthless scrub and rock to ignorant eyes. His voice lowered conspiratorially. But it contains the headwaters feeding both the girl's miserable spring and our town well. And the girl owns it, her father's claim. That fool Thomas Fisher died of fever up there 3 years ago, but he filed proper papers first. The girl inherited. Hargrove's mouth twisted bitterly. I've diverted flow temporarily with a dam on my adjacent property, but it's crude. For permanent control, I need her land. You can't claim abandoned property while she lives somewhere. Turner concluded, understanding dawning. The law requires 7 years abandonment or proof of death. Hargrove straightened his expensive waistcoat with manicured fingers. I planned for abandonment. The well poisoning was to drive her out, not kill her, just scare her away. The lynch mob was... He waved dismissively. Unfortunate escalation. Turner leaned forward, suddenly more interested. And if she's with the Apache, a cold smile spread across Hargrove's face. Then we have a providential solution. The territorial governor would be fascinated to hear about savages kidnapping a white child. The army would have cause to remove them permanently from those hunting grounds that happen to adjoin the water rights I need. You hate her specially, Turner observed shrewdly. More than business explains. Something ancient and ugly flickered in Hargrove's eyes. Her father was my business partner once. He discovered the underground river system while we were mining together. Instead of sharing the find, he filed independent claim. His fist clenched. Then my son died in the first drought, while Thomas Fisher's worthless daughter enjoyed flowing water. Turner's estimation of Hargrove's ruthlessness rose considerably. Personal vengeance always burned hotter than mere profit. They're camped in Shadow Canyon, Turner said, pocketing the money bag without further negotiation. Hidden spot. Spring's nearly dry but still running. The girls already found water for them twice. They're treating her like she's spirit-blessed. How close can you get me? Turner smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Close enough for you to watch the light leave her eyes. But there's something else you should know. He leaned forward. The girl doesn't just find water. From what I observed, water responds to her somehow. Unnatural-like. Hargrove's expression darkened. More reason she needs to disappear permanently. Clara woke gasping from nightmares of hanging hands flying to her throat, where elderly Hawk's poultice covered the rope burns. Dawn's first light filtered through the hide covering of the shelter, where she'd spent 3 restless nights. Outside, she heard Apache conversations, the scraping of stone against hide children's quiet laughter. The hidden canyon camp housed perhaps 30 people families with haunted eyes that spoke of hunger and displacement. Lila ducked inside, carrying a small water skin and dried meat. The bad dreams come less now? She asked in careful English. Clara nodded hesitantly, accepting breakfast with downcast eyes. No shame in fear, Lila said firmly. After my first raid, I couldn't sleep for days. Father says fear keeps us alive when we use it right. The matter-of-fact tone made Clara look up. Lila's face held no pity, only pragmatic acceptance of a harsh world refreshing after years of either cruel dismissal or suffocating sympathy from townsfolk. Father wishes to speak when you've eaten. Lila continued. The elders remain unconvinced about you. Clara swallowed hard, apprehension tightening her chest. Show them your gift, Lila advised. Words mean little to them. Action speaks truth. 20 minutes later, Clara stood before 5 tribal elders, including Nahuel. Their impassive faces studied the small white girl with her rope-scarred neck and donated deerskin dress. Our people suffer. Nahuel began his English, carefully paced for Clara's benefit. The drought enters its 2nd year. Game vanishes plants, withered children cry from thirst. He fixed her with an unwavering stare. Elderly Hawk believes you find water where others see only dust. True magic or lucky guessing? Clara hesitated, uncertain how to explain without words something she barely understood herself, the strange sensitivity to hidden patterns beneath the earth vibrations and currents only she could perceive. Blue Hawk, an elder with deeply etched face, spoke rapidly in Apache. Nahuel translated. He asks for proof, not promises. Our summer water hole fails. If you possess this gift, demonstrate now. Clara nodded firmly, pointing to herself, then outside, making a searching motion. The girl wishes to search the canyon, Nahuel explained. The elders nodded skeptical approval. The entire camp fell silent as Clara walked slowly across the dusty ground, bare feet seeming to test each step. She closed her eyes occasionally, head tilting as if listening to something beyond normal hearing. Near the canyon's western edge, far from their existing but failing spring, she stopped abruptly. Clara knelt, placing both palms flat against a patch of ground that looked identical to every other. She nodded with unmistakable certainty, pointing downward. Here. Nahuel confirmed. You believe water flows beneath this spot? Clara nodded again emphatically. The elders exchanged doubtful glances, but Nahuel instructed 2 young warriors to bring digging tools. As they worked, Clara kept gesturing lower, indicating they should continue deeper. By 4 feet, sweat soaked the diggers despite the cool morning. Suddenly, one called out in surprise. The soil at the bottom had darkened with moisture. By sunset, they had uncovered a small but steady spring, not abundant, but enough to supplement their dwindling supply. The tribe gathered around in amazement as clear water pooled in the excavation. The silent girl speaks truth through the earth. Blue Hawk announced, addressing Clara directly for the first time. The ground answers her questions when it ignores our prayers. Elderly Hawk approached, placing a wrinkled hand on Clara's head in blessing. The spirits speak through the silent ones. She said in English, her intense gaze boring into Clara. Water whispers its secrets to you because you listen differently. That night, as the tribe cautiously celebrated with slightly increased water rations, Nahuel found Clara sitting alone at the camp's edge, staring toward the distant lights of Copper Canyon. You think of the town that tried to kill you? He asked, settling beside her with characteristic directness. Clara shrugged, then made a rocking motion with her arms. Your parents, Nahuel interpreted. When she nodded, he continued, they are buried there. Another nod followed by a drawing motion in the dirt. Something hidden. When Clara nodded again, Nahuel understood. Something of your family you wish to recover. Clara drew the rough shape of a small box in the dirt between them. I must trade in the White Town soon, Nahuel said after thoughtful consideration. We need medicine's ammunition. Perhaps I could find this box if you show me where. Hope flared in Clara's eyes, immediately followed by terror. She pointed to Nahuel, then drew her finger across her throat in unmistakable warning. Yes, danger walks there, he acknowledged calmly. But I have moved among whites for many seasons. They see only what they expect a simple Indian come to trade. What neither suspected was that Jake Turner already crouched in darkness beyond the camp's perimeter, documenting their movements, calculating guard positions for the attack Hargrove was assembling with cold precision. Sheriff Wilson dabbed iodine on the cut above his eye, wincing at the sting. The jail cell mirror reflected 3 days of stubbled growth and the purple bruising from yesterday's confrontation with Hargrove's men. "I brought those samples from behind the stables," Deputy Mills announced, entering with a canvas bag. The young deputy's usual easygoing manner had hardened since Clara's near lynching. "Copper sulfate, just like you thought. Same stuff they use at the mine for treating timber." Wilson examined the blue crystals. "Perfect for making folks think their water's poisoned without causing immediate deaths. Hargrove played this town masterfully. Don't see what good evidence does now," Mills said bitterly. "His men outnumber us 5-1, and half the town still believes the girl cursed the well. The circuit judge arrives next week. With this evidence and proper testimony, the office door burst open as Mackenzie, the Scottish general store owner, rushed in. Sheriff Apache spotted at the east edge of town. Wilson grabbed his gun belt. "How many?" "Just one. Looks like that scout Nahuel. He's heading toward the old Fisher shack." Wilson and Mills exchanged sharp glances. "Keep this quiet," Wilson ordered. "If Hargrove's men get wind of it—" "Aye, that's why I came directly. The bastards have been offering gold for any Apache sighting." 10 minutes later, Wilson approached the dilapidated shack where Clara had lived after her parents' death. He spotted Nahuel emerging something small tucked inside his shirt. "Long ride from your hunting grounds," Wilson called out, keeping his stance non-threatening despite his hand resting near his holster. Nahuel went rigid, then relaxed marginally upon recognizing the sheriff. "I trade where business takes me." "Interesting business in an abandoned shack." Wilson stepped closer. "The girl is with your people. Isn't she safe?" Nahuel's face remained impassive, giving nothing away. Wilson sighed. "I'm not your enemy. Clara was wrongly accused. I've been testing the well water, found evidence of tampering. Hargrove poisoned it himself to manufacture a crisis." "Why tell me this?" "Because Hargrove is planning something bigger. He's annexed Clara's land, claiming abandonment. He's built some kind of dam on the upper creek. And he's offering gold for information about Apache movements." Nahuel studied Wilson with unnerving intensity. "You warned me." "Why?" "Because I swore to uphold the law, real law, not Hargrove's version." Wilson lowered his voice. "The circuit judge arrives in 4 days. With Clara's testimony and my evidence, we could stop him legally. But I need to keep her safe until then." The moment hung balanced between tentative trust and generations of betrayal. Then slow clapping shattered the silence. "Well, ain't this touching?" Jake Turner drawled, emerging from behind the shack with his rifle trained on them. "Sheriff conspiring with an Indian. That'll play well with the townsfolk." Wilson's hand moved toward his holster, but Turner's warning shot kicked up dirt an inch from his boot. "Now that badge don't make you bulletproof." Turner sneered. "Hands where I can see 'em, both of you." Wilson complied reluctantly. "You're making a mistake, Turner. Interfering with a lawman looks more like treason to me." Turner's eyes gleamed with malice. "Hargrove's men are already converging on your Apache camp. That little water witch won't be finding any more springs after today." Nahuel's expression didn't change, but something deadly flared in his eyes. "If harm comes to our people, you'll what?" Turner laughed. "You'll be feeding coyotes by sundown." Without warning, Nahuel dropped to one knee, flinging dirt into Turner's eyes with lightning speed. The trapper fired blindly, the shot going wild as Wilson tackled him. Both men crashed to the ground, struggling for control of the rifle. Turner's survival instincts proved honed by years in unforgiving territory. He slammed his forehead into Wilson's nose, sending the sheriff reeling backward as blood spurted. Turner rolled, bringing the rifle to bear. only to freeze as Nahuel's knife pressed against his throat, drawing a thin line of crimson. "Shoot and die," the Apache said simply. Turner swallowed carefully, Adam's apple bobbing against the blade edge. "Killing a white man's a death sentence for your whole tribe." "Perhaps," Nahuel agreed with chilling calm, "but you will not witness it." Wilson recovered, wiping blood from his face. "Nobody dies today. Nahuel, we need him alive. He knows Hargrove's plans." After a tense moment, Nahuel withdrew the knife, but not before carving a deliberate nick that would leave a permanent reminder. "Talk," Wilson demanded as they bound Turner's hands. "What's Hargrove planning for the Apache camp?" Turner spat blood. "Go to hell." Wilson checked his revolver's chamber with deliberate slowness. "Wrong answer. Let's try again. How many men? When do they attack?" Fear finally penetrated Turner's bravado. "Lieutenant Hayes arrives tomorrow with the monthly patrol. 5 soldiers. Hargroves convinced him the Apache kidnapped the girl. They plan to surround the camp at dawn the day after." Nahuel's expression darkened. "I must warn my people. We'll both go," Wilson decided. "But first we need to understand exactly what Hargroves built at the Upper Creek. Turner, you're going to show us." Clara sat cross-legged by her discovered spring teaching to Coda, a 10-year-old boy orphaned by cavalry action, how to weave a simple basket from reeds. Despite her silence, she had developed effective communication through gestures and drawings. For the first time since her parents' deaths, people looked at her with something other than suspicion or pity. Here, her silence was not a curse, but merely a different way of being. Her water-finding gift had transformed her from outsider to valued community member almost overnight. Elderly Hawk approached face grave. "Nahuel should have returned by now," she said. "Something is wrong." Clara's hands stilled on her basket, apprehension tightening her chest. She pointed toward town, then to the sun's position, making a questioning gesture. "Yes, he left before dawn. Even allowing time to trade, he should have returned by midday." The old woman scanned the horizon. "I fear..." A warning cry from the canyon entrance interrupted her. 2 scouts raced into camp, shouting an alarm. Warriors grabbed weapons while women hurried children toward rock shelters. Lila appeared at Clara's side, pulling her urgently to her feet. "Riders coming," she explained breathlessly. "Many with guns." Clara's face paled. She pointed in the direction Nahuel had gone, her expression frantic. "Father has not returned," Lila confirmed grimly. "Come, we must hide you." As they hurried toward the rocks, Clara suddenly froze, her head tilting, as if listening to something beyond normal hearing. She tugged at Lila's hand, pointing urgently toward the western approach opposite from where the scouts had reported riders. "What is it?" Lila asked, confused. Clara pressed her palm against the ground eyes, closing in concentration. After a moment, she looked up with certainty, gesturing for Lila to follow her toward a narrow trail leading up the canyon wall. "You sense something." When Clara nodded firmly, Lila made her decision. "I trust you, Waterfinder." The girls scrambled up the steep trail just as armed riders appeared at the eastern canyon entrance. Not soldiers as expected, but Hargrove himself, leading 6 rough-looking men. From their elevated position, Clara and Lila watched in horror as the men surrounded the camp. "Where's the girl?" Hargrove's voice carried clearly. "The mute child. Bring her out." The Apache warriors formed a protective circle. Blue Hawk stepped forward. "There is no white child here," he stated in halting English. "You trespass on Apache ground." Hargrove's laugh held no humor. "Don't play games with me, savage. We know the witch girl is here. Turn her over, or we'll burn your pathetic camp to ashes." Clara trembled with guilt. These people had protected her, and now faced death because of it. "Look," one of Hargrove's men shouted, pointing toward Clara's half-finished basket. "That's white maid." Hargrove smiled coldly. "Search every shelter, every crevice. Find the girl. Kill anyone who resists. As the men dismounted and began their search, Clara made a decision. Despite Lila's desperate grip on her arm, she prepared to reveal herself rather than let violence erupt. A sharp sound stopped her hoofbeats approaching rapidly from the western trail. 3 riders appeared: Nahuel, Sheriff Wilson, and Deputy Mills. Hargrove. Wilson's voice boomed across the canyon. This ends now. Confusion rippled through both groups as the newcomers galloped into the standoff. Hargrove's face contorted with fury. This is none of your concern, Wilson. These Indians kidnapped a citizen of Copper Canyon. That's a lie, and you know it. Wilson countered, dismounting with his badge catching sunlight. The girl fled to save her life after you tried to hang her for a crime you committed. The accusation hung like gun smoke. Even Hargrove's men exchanged uncertain glances. Careful, Sheriff. Hargrove warned, eyes narrowing to dangerous slits. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Wilson produced several papers from his saddlebag. These are your purchase orders for copper sulfate signed one day before the well mysteriously turned poisonous. And this, he held up another document, is a sworn statement from your former foreman detailing how you ordered him to contaminate the town's water. Murmurs arose from Hargrove's men, clearly hearing this for the first time. But it gets worse. Wilson continued relentlessly. We've just come from the Upper Creek. Care to explain the dam you've built, the one diverting water from both the town and Clara's property to your private reservoir? Hargrove's composed facade cracked. You're overstepping, Wilson. I built water management infrastructure for the town's benefit. Infrastructure you plan to charge for. Wilson fired back. After manufacturing a crisis and stealing land from an orphaned child whose father you once called partner, from their hidden position, Clara watched with racing heart. Lila translated rapid Apache exchanges between Nahuel and the warriors below. My father says prepare to run if fighting starts, she whispered. The sheriff has evidence, but Hargrove has guns and desperate men. The standoff teetered on violence's edge. Hargrove's hand hovered near his holstered revolver. Enough talk, he declared. You're outnumbered, Wilson. Stand aside or die with the savages. I am the law here, Wilson said quietly, and Lieutenant Hayes will hear the full truth when he arrives tomorrow. Something shifted in Hargrove's expression, a calculating coldness replacing fury. Tomorrow will be too late for many here. He turned to his men. Burn the camp. Kill them all. Find the girl. The first shot came not from Hargrove or Wilson, but from the ridge above Lieutenant Hayes himself, firing a warning shot. Everyone froze as Hayes and 5 blue-coated soldiers appeared on horseback rifles ready. Stand down, Hayes commanded. What in God's name is happening here? Wilson moved quickly. Lieutenant, thank heaven you're early. These men, he indicated Hargrove's group, were about to massacre peaceful Apache based on manufactured lies. I have evidence of Hargrove's crimes. Hayes, barely 25, with West Point education evident in his ramrod posture, looked bewildered by the complex situation. I received reports of Apache abducting a white child. False reports, Wilson countered. The girl fled attempted murder after being falsely accused of poisoning the town well. Clara made her decision. Before Lila could stop her, she stood and whistled sharply, her one reliable sound. All eyes turned toward her position on the canyon wall. There she is, Hargrove shouted triumphantly. The witch girl. Clara descended steadily, her small frame straight with newfound dignity, despite her fear. When she reached the canyon floor, she walked directly to Hayes, stopping before his horse and looking up without flinching. This is Clara Fisher, Wilson introduced her. Orphaned 3 years ago, mute since birth, but far from helpless. Hayes studied her with evident confusion, noting her rope-scarred neck. She appears unharmed and unrestrained. Because she's here by choice, Wilson explained. After nearly being lynched based on Hargrove's manufactured evidence. Hayes dismounted, approaching Clara with cautious respect. "Is this true, child? Were you taken against your will?" Clara shook her head firmly, then pointed accusingly at Hargrove before drawing a finger across her throat in unmistakable meaning. Something in Hargrove snapped. "She's bewitched you all," he snarled, drawing his revolver with startling speed. "The girl dies today." Multiple actions happened simultaneously. Wilson drew his weapon. Apache warriors raised bows. Hayes shouted orders. But Hargrove's shot cracked first, the bullet speeding toward Clara's heart. In a blur of movement, Nahuel threw himself into the bullet's path, spinning from the impact. Blood blossomed on his shoulder as he collapsed. "Father!" Lila's anguished cry pierced the chaos as she ran to Nahuel's side. Clara stood frozen in horror as Hargrove leveled his revolver for a second shot. Their eyes met across the distance, hers wide with terror, his cold with murderous intent. The ground beneath Hargrove suddenly shifted, a subtle movement no one else noticed. His boot sank slightly into soil that had appeared solid moments before. Clara felt the vibration through her bare feet, underground water responding to her distress, weakening the earth below her would-be killer. As Hargrove fired again, the ground gave way beneath him. His shot went wild as he plunged knee-deep into a sudden sinkhole, water bubbling up around his expensive boots. His men, seeing their leader falter and facing armed soldiers, threw down their weapons. Hayes took control with military efficiency, ordering his men to secure Hargrove and his gang, while Wilson explained the full extent of the saloon owner's crimes. Clara rushed to Nahuel's side, where elderly Hawk examined his wound. "The bullet passed through," the old woman announced. "He will live with proper care." Nahuel gripped Clara's small hand with surprising strength. "You saved many lives today, Waterfinder," he said through gritted teeth. "The spirits speak through you in ways more powerful than voice." Tears streamed down Clara's face as she nodded. She placed her palm against the ground, feeling the vibrations of hidden waters that had responded to her, not consciously summoned, but somehow connected to her deepest emotions. "The girl has power she does not yet understand," elderly Hawk murmured. "The water answers her heart, not just her searching fingers." Lieutenant Hayes approached cautiously. "The Apache scout requires medical attention. My men can transport him to the fort doctor." "No," Wilson interjected. "Nahuel stays with his people. Their medicine is as good as ours for bullet wounds, and he'd be treated as a prisoner at the fort." He turned to Hayes. "What matters now is getting Hargrove and this evidence to the circuit judge immediately." Hayes nodded, military discipline reasserting itself. "I'll escort you personally to Jerome. The judge should hear this evidence directly." He glanced at Clara with newfound respect. "And the girl's testimony, however she can provide it." Clara looked between Wilson and the Apache camp, uncertainty clear in her expression. This was her moment of choosing return to white society that had nearly killed her, or remain with those who had saved her. Nahuel seemed to read her thoughts. "Go with the sheriff," he said weakly. "Bring justice. We will be here when you return." Wilson knelt beside Clara. "I'll keep you safe this time, I promise. Once the judge hears everything, Hargrove will never threaten you again." After a moment's hesitation, Clara nodded. But before leaving, she walked to where Hargrove stood restrained between two soldiers, glaring hatred at her. To everyone's surprise, she placed her palm flat against the ground before him, then looked up with quiet certainty. The message was clear. Even without words, the earth itself had sided against him. Judge Franklin Eisenhower's court in Jerome buzzed with unprecedented activity. Every seat was filled. Townsfolk from Copper Canyon, reporters from as far as Phoenix, and a delegation of Apache permitted to attend at the judge's insistence. Hargrove sat at the defendant's table, his usual fine attire replaced by plain prisoner's clothes. His lawyer, brought from Phoenix at considerable expense, shuffled papers nervously. "This is a most extraordinary case," Judge Eisenhower remarked, adjusting his spectacles as he reviewed the documents. With bushy white eyebrows and penetrating eyes, he looked exactly as a frontier judge should, stern but scrupulously fair. "Sheriff Wilson, please summarize the charges for the court." Wilson stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Hargrove is charged with water rights fraud, destruction of public property, attempted murder, and conspiracy to incite violence against peaceful Apache. Evidence proves he deliberately poisoned Copper Canyon's well with copper sulfate, created an artificial water shortage by damming the natural flow from Clara Fisher's property, then attempted to frame the girl and drive her from her land. When that failed, he resorted to attempted murder." Murmurs swept through the courtroom as many townsfolk heard the full extent of the scheme for the first time. "And the attempted murder charge?" the judge inquired. "Multiple counts, Your Honor. First, orchestrating a lynch mob against Clara Fisher after falsely accusing her of poisoning the well. Second, directly shooting at her with intent to kill during the confrontation at the Apache camp, wounding Nahuel, who intercepted the bullet. We have 23 witnesses, including Lieutenant Hayes and his patrol." The judge nodded gravely, then turned his piercing gaze to Clara, who sat beside Wilson in a clean dress provided by the judge's wife, her rope-scarred neck partially hidden by a kerchief. "The young lady," he said gently, "I understand you cannot speak, but I would hear your testimony in whatever form you can provide it." Clara stood her small frame straight with newfound dignity, despite trembling hands. At Wilson's encouragement, she approached a large map of Copper Canyon territory mounted for the proceedings. With careful precision, she indicated her property, then the location of the natural spring and underground waterways. Using a slate provided by the court, she drew illustrations showing how water naturally flowed to feed both her spring and the town well, and how Hargrove's dam had interrupted this system. Judge Eisenhower watched with remarkable patience, occasionally asking questions that Clara answered with nods or drawings. When she finished, she pointed directly at Hargrove, then to her rope-scarred neck with unwavering conviction. "I find your testimony most eloquent, Miss Fisher," the judge said warmly. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than the most flowery speech." His expression hardened as he turned toward Hargrove. "More than I can say for those who would exploit a child's vulnerability for profit and revenge." Hargrove's lawyer rose quickly. "Your Honor, my client admits constructing a water management system on what he believed was unclaimed land, a regrettable misunderstanding of property boundaries at worst. These more serious allegations rely on circumstantial evidence and the dubious testimony of a mute child and Indians with obvious bias." Tension rippled through the courtroom at his dismissive tone. The Apache delegation stiffened visibly. Judge Eisenhower's bushy eyebrows drew together ominously. "Counselor, I strongly advise reconsidering your language and approach. The evidence before me includes written records in your client's own hand detailing his scheme." He held up the ledger Wilson had recovered. "Furthermore, Lieutenant Hayes has submitted sworn testimony corroborating the events at the Apache camp, including your client's unprovoked attempt to murder Miss Fisher." The lawyer conferred briefly with Hargrove, whose face had grown increasingly ashen. "Your Honor, given the circumstances, my client wishes to propose restitution. He will surrender all claims to the disputed water rights, compensate the town for hardships caused by water shortages, and withdraw entirely from the territory. A generous offer from a man facing the gallows," the judge observed dryly. "However, justice is not negotiable." He turned to Clara. "Young lady, the water rights to your property are hereby confirmed in your name to be held in trust by Sheriff Wilson until you reach maturity." He cleared his throat before continuing. "As for Mr. Hargrove, this court sentences you to 15 years hard labor at Yuma Territorial Prison for your crimes. Your assets will be liquidated to provide restitution to Copper Canyon's residents and the Apache tribe whose peace you disturbed." As Hargrove was led away in shackles, his usual arrogance replaced by stunned disbelief, the judge addressed the packed courtroom directly. Let this case serve as notice that in this territory, water rights and human rights stand equally sacred before the law. No man's greed supersedes either. 4 months later, Clara stood beside Wilson on a ridge overlooking Copper Canyon. Below, the town had transformed new buildings, replacing those damaged in the flood caused by Hargrove's collapsing dam with a central plaza now featuring a stone fountain fed by natural springs Clara had helped locate. The final section of aqueduct was completed yesterday, Wilson informed her. Water now flows freely to both the town reservoir and the Apache summer grounds. He smiled down at his young ward. Judge Eisenhower's calling it the first legal water-sharing agreement between settlers and tribes in territorial history. Clara beamed, standing noticeably taller than before. Regular meals at Widow Gardner's table had filled out her once gaunt frame, and dedicated tutoring had expanded her ability to communicate through writing and formal sign language. Her hands moved in a flurry of now familiar gestures. Yes. Wilson chuckled, interpreting easily. You did end up finding water for everyone, just not the way anyone expected. Something in his tone made Clara look up questioningly. Wilson hesitated before continuing. Deputy Mills intercepted an interesting visitor yesterday. A man from Chicago claiming to represent something called the Heatherfield Institute for Parapsychological Research. He watched Clara's expression carefully. Apparently, word of your water-finding ability has spread beyond our territory. Clara's eyes widened in alarm. Don't worry, Wilson reassured her. I sent him packing, but he won't be the last. People are fascinated by things they don't understand. Clara's hands formed new signs, slower and more deliberate. No, I don't think you're a witch or have devil's powers, Wilson replied firmly. I think you have a gift and extraordinary sensitivity to something the rest of us can't perceive. He gazed across the landscape. This territory is full of mysteries, ancient ruins, unexplained formations, stories of places where the veil between worlds thins. Maybe your ability is just another of those mysteries. A commotion from town interrupted their conversation. Deputy Mills rode up the trail toward them, his horse lathered with exertion. Sheriff, he called, reining in sharply. Turner's back with armed men. They've seized the new pump house at the reservoir junction. Wilson tensed. Jake Turner had escaped custody during transfer to Yuma Prison 2 months earlier, swearing vengeance on all who had testified against Hargrove. How many? 6, maybe 7, Mills reported grimly. Turner demands the girl come alone, or he'll destroy the entire water system. Clara's face paled, but her jaw set with surprising determination. She signed rapidly to Wilson. Absolutely not, he responded firmly. I won't use you as bait no matter what you think you can do. She signed again more insistently. I don't care if you think the water will help you, Wilson argued. Turner's dangerous and desperate. Clara stamped her foot in frustration, then scribbled furiously on her slate, Water responds to me. Trust me. Wilson and Mills exchanged troubled glances. What does she mean the water responds to her? Mills asked. At the Apache camp. Wilson explained reluctantly. When Hargrove shot at her, witnesses said the ground beneath him suddenly collapsed into a sinkhole. Water bubbled up from nowhere. He studied Clara with new understanding. You believe you caused that, don't you? Clara nodded emphatically. That's impossible, Mills protested. Nobody can control water with their mind. But Wilson remembered the strange certainty in Clara's eyes that day, the way she had placed her palm against the earth before Hargrove fell. I'm not so sure anymore, he murmured. But even if it's true, it's too dangerous. Clara scribbled again, people will die without water. Drought returning. She was right, and Wilson knew it. The new water system was vital without it. Both town and tribe would face severe shortages during the approaching dry season. Fine, he finally conceded. But we do this my way. You don't go anywhere near Turner until I say it's safe. The newly constructed pump house stood at the convergence of 3 underground springs Clara had located. Simple yet elegant, it housed machinery that regulated water flow to both Copper Canyon and the Apache hunting grounds through separate aqueduct systems. From their concealed position in the rocks overlooking the stone building, Wilson assessed the situation with grim precision. Turner had positioned his men strategically, 2 guarding the entrance, others patrolling the perimeter. Through his field glasses, Wilson could see explosives placed at critical structural points. He's not bluffing, Wilson whispered to Mills and the 2 deputies who had joined them. Those charges could destroy the entire water system. Clara tugged at his sleeve, her expression questioning. No change in plan, Wilson said firmly. I announce our presence attempt negotiation. You stay hidden until... Wilson. Turner's voice echoed across the rocky terrain. I know you're out there. Send out the witch girl in the next 5 minutes, or I start the fireworks. He's forcing our hand, Mills muttered. Wilson made a swift decision. Circle around behind them. Wait for my signal. He turned to Clara. Stay here. No matter what happens, do not reveal yourself until I call for you. Clara nodded, though something in her eyes suggested she had plans of her own. Wilson stood, raising his voice. Turner, let's talk this through. No need for anyone to get hurt today. Nothing to discuss, Turner shouted back. Hargrove's rotting in Yuma because of that mute devil spawn. My reputation's ruined. Only fair she pays the price. Hargrove ruined himself, Wilson countered, moving slowly into view with his hands raised. And you're making the same mistake he did, underestimating that girl's value to this community. Turner emerged from the pump house, rifle cradled casually in his arms. The jagged scar where Nahuel's knife had marked his throat stood livid against his weathered skin. Community, since when do you count Apache as community sheriff? Since I realized water doesn't care about the color of the hands that drink it, Wilson replied evenly. We've established something remarkable here, Turner. First peaceful water-sharing agreement in territorial history. Peace with savages, Turner spat. Hargrove was right, this territory's going soft. It's called civilization. Wilson took another careful step forward. Something you might consider embracing before you hang for destroying territorial water infrastructure. Turner's eyes narrowed. Nobody's hanging me. After today, I'm headed to Mexico with enough gold to live like a king. His voice hardened. Now where's the girl? Time's almost up. From her hiding place, Clara observed with racing heart. She could feel the water beneath them, stronger, more vital than she'd ever sensed before. The convergence of springs amplified her strange connection to the hidden currents. She placed her palm against the ground, closing her eyes in concentration. The vibrations responded immediately. Not just awareness now, but something approaching communication. The water recognized her, somehow awaited her guidance. Clara had practiced this in secret for months, testing the limits of her ability by making small underground springs bubble up or shift direction. Never anything dramatic enough to raise questions, but sufficient to confirm what she had suspected since the confrontation with Hargrove. Her gift went beyond finding water. On some inexplicable level, water found her too. Below, the standoff continued deteriorating. Turner had grown impatient with Wilson's delaying tactics. On last chance, sheriff, the girl or the water system, choose. Wilson's hand hovered near his holster. There's a third option, Turner. Surrender now and I'll speak for leniency at your trial. Turner's laugh was brittle with madness. Always the honorable lawman. In a lightning move, he raised his rifle and fired. Wilson dove for cover as the bullet kicked up dirt inches from his boots. Deputies returned fire from multiple positions, forcing Turner back into the pump house. The yard erupted into chaos as Turner's men engaged in a shootout with Wilson's deputies. Clara made her decision. Ignoring Wilson's direct order, she crept along the ridge to position herself directly above the pump house. From this vantage point, she could see Turner barricaded inside, preparing to light the fuses on his explosives as the gunfight provided cover. Closing her eyes, Clara pressed both palms flat against the rocky ground. She envisioned the network of water channels beneath the surface, the convergence of three powerful springs, creating a nexus of fluid pressure directly below the pump house. "Rise," she commanded silently, "rise." For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then a low rumble vibrated through the bedrock, so subtle at first that only Clara noticed. The vibration intensified, spreading outward from her hands like ripples in a pond. Inside the pump house, Turner froze at the strange sensation beneath his feet. Water began seeping through cracks in the stone floor slowly at first, then with increasing force. "What the hell?" he muttered, backing away as the puddle expanded rapidly. Outside, gunfire faltered as both sides registered the growing tremor. A jet of water suddenly burst through the pump house floor with geyser-like force, spraying the interior and drenching the explosives before Turner could light them. "Witch!" Turner screamed, abandoning the useless explosives and charging out of the building with wild eyes. "I know you're here." He spotted Clara on the ridge above her small figure, silhouetted against the sky hands, still pressed to the ground. With an incoherent cry of rage, Turner raised his rifle and fired. The bullet never reached its target. A column of water erupted from the ground between them, intercepting the shot in a spectacular spray that momentarily created a rainbow in the desert air. The water continued surging upward, forming a barrier between Clara and her would-be killer. But Clara's focus wavered. She had never attempted control on this scale before. The water shield faltered, allowing Turner to sight his rifle for a second shot. "Clara, down!" a voice shouted from her left. Deputy Mills burst from cover, racing toward her with startling speed. As Turner fired again, Mills leapt forward, shielding Clara with his body. The bullet struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around with the impact. "Mills!" Wilson shouted in horror. Clara stared in shock at the wounded deputy who had sacrificed himself for her. But instead of the expected pain and fear, Mills's face showed something entirely unexpected, a cold, calculating smile. "Should have stayed hidden, girl," he gasped, drawing his revolver with his uninjured arm. "Hargrove pays better than Wilson ever could." The devastating truth hit Clara like a physical blow. Mills had been Hargrove's spy all along. He'd never intended to protect her. He'd seen an opportunity to complete what Hargrove had started. As Mills raised his weapon at point-blank range, Clara's terror and betrayal surged through her like lightning. The ground beneath them suddenly heaved with tremendous force. A massive geyser erupted directly under Mills, throwing him 20 feet into the air before he crashed down among the rocks, motionless. The display of raw power froze everyone Turner's men deputies, even Wilson, in stunned silence. Turner himself stared in genuine fear. "What are you?" he whispered hoarsely. Clara's response was immediate and terrifying. With both hands pressed firmly into the earth, she called to all the water beneath the reservoir junction. The ground began to tremble violently as underground currents responded to her rage and fear. Fissures opened across the yard as water burst upward in a dozen places simultaneously. Turner's men fled in panic, abandoning weapons and wounded alike. Turner himself stood paralyzed as a circular crack formed around him, isolating him on a rapidly deteriorating island of earth. "Clara, stop," Wilson called out, recognizing the dangerous escalation. "You'll bring down the entire cliff." But Clara couldn't stop or wouldn't. The betrayal had unleashed something primal within her, a connection to the water that bypassed conscious control. The very ground beneath the pump house began to sag, as subterranean caverns collapsed, water roaring upward with increasing violence. "Clara." A different voice cut through the chaos, Nahuel appearing suddenly at the ridge's edge. His arm remained in a sling from Hargrove's bullet, but he moved with determined purpose toward the girl. "Hear me, water speaker. The spirits answer your pain, but you must guide them." Clara's eyes were distant, lost in the surging power flowing through her. Nahuel reached her side, kneeling to meet her gaze. "The water is part of you, but you are not only water," he said with urgent intensity. "You are also earth, air, fire, human. Find balance, or destroy what you sought to protect." His words penetrated her trance. Clara looked down at the devastation she was causing, the pump house beginning to tilt as its foundation eroded. Turner, trapped and terrified on his crumbling island, Wilson and his loyal deputies trying desperately to reach higher ground. With tremendous effort, she pulled back from the precipice of total destruction. Her hands trembled against the earth as she visualized the underground currents calming, finding new channels that wouldn't destroy the surface structures. Gradually, the violent eruption subsided. The ground stabilized, the water continued flowing in gentler streams around the pump house rather than through it. Turner remained isolated on his island, now surrounded by a moat-like circle of flowing water. "And that's it," Nahuel encouraged quietly. "Guide, don't command. The water knows its proper path." Clara exhaled slowly, her small body shaking with exhaustion. The tremendous output of energy, physical, emotional, and whatever mysterious force connected her to the water had drained her completely. Wilson waded through knee-deep water to reach Turner's island. The trapper had dropped his rifle, all fight gone from him, as he stared at Clara with genuine terror. "She ain't human," Turner whispered as Wilson secured his hands. "Can't be. She's more human than you ever were," Wilson replied coldly. "She could have killed you, should have by rights, but she chose control instead." As deputies rounded up Turner's surrendered men, Wilson looked up to where Nahuel helped Clara to her feet. The Apache scouts' timely arrival raised questions, but Wilson's immediate concern was Clara's well-being. She looked dangerously pale. "Is she all right?" he called to Nahuel. "She needs rest," Nahuel replied. "The power takes much from her." Wilson nodded, then turned his attention to the unexpected betrayal. "Mills was working for Hargrove all along," he said bitterly. "I should have seen it." Nahuel's expression remained impassive. "The snake hides until it strikes. You could not have known." Clara stumbled slightly as they descended to join Wilson. Despite her exhaustion, she pointed urgently toward Mills's crumpled form and made a questioning gesture. "Still breathing," Wilson confirmed grimly. "Though he'll wish he wasn't when he stands trial for treason and attempted murder." Clara's hands formed shaky signs. "Yes," Nahuel translated. "She asks how you knew to come." Elderly Hawk had another vision danger at the place where waters join. This time, I did not question. He studied Clara with newfound respect. Her power grows stronger, as does her control. Today, she could have washed away half the mountain. Wilson looked around at the altered landscape, water flowing in new channels around the damaged but still functional pump house. Turner and his men subdued Mills, exposed as a traitor. "The girl keeps rewriting the territory's future," he said with quiet amazement. Clara tugged at his sleeve and pointed to the horizon where dust signaled approaching riders. "Lieutenant Hayes," Wilson observed. "Right on time to miss all the action." Clara managed a tired smile, then wrote carefully on her slate, "Water finds its way. So do people." 1 year later, Clara stood before the newly constructed schoolhouse, straddling the boundary between Copper Canyon and Apache territory. Children from both communities played together in the yard, their previous divisions forgotten in the universal language of youth. Now, 13. Clara had grown inches taller and worlds wiser. Her role as water speaker had evolved from simple finder of springs to respected mediator between cultures. The Apache taught her their sophisticated sign language, while she learned to read and write English with remarkable speed. "They're ready for you," Wilson said, approaching with a smile. He had traded his sheriff's badge for the position of Territorial Water Commissioner, a role created specifically to implement the water-sharing systems Clara had helped design across the region. Clara nodded, momentarily nervous, despite her new confidence. Inside waited territorial officials, tribal leaders, and even a representative from Washington, all gathered to formalize the unprecedented agreement that would protect both communities' water rights for generations. "Remember," Wilson advised quietly, "you don't have to speak to be heard. Your actions have done that already." Clara's hands formed familiar signs. "Water speaks through me." I just translate. As they entered the schoolhouse, Clara spotted familiar faces, Nahuel, an elderly hawk representing the Apache, Judge Eisenhower presiding, Lila and Dakota sitting proudly with tribal children permitted to witness history. On a table at the front lay the formal agreement, the Fisher Doctrine, as officials had dubbed it. The document established revolutionary principles, shared management of water resources, protection of natural springs, equal access rights, regardless of race, and recognition of Clara's unique abilities as a legitimate method for locating new water sources. Judge Eisenhower called for silence as Clara approached. "Today marks a new chapter in territorial history," he announced. "For too long, water has been cause for conflict. Thanks to Clara Fisher's extraordinary gift and extraordinary courage, water now becomes our reason for cooperation." Clara signed her name with careful precision. More than just a signature, it represented transformation from unwanted orphan to essential community member, from feared outsider to respected bridge between worlds. As applause filled the room, Clara caught Nahuel's eye. The stoic scout offered a rare smile and a subtle gesture. Only she would understand his hand, forming the shape of flowing water, then pointing to his heart and finally extending toward hers. "The waters connect us all beneath the surface," his gesture conveyed. "As you reminded us. Outside, former enemies shared stories beside the community well." Clara stood at the threshold between cultures, her silence no longer a limitation, but a different kind of voice, one that had finally been heard across the divide. And deep beneath the surface, the hidden waters continued their ancient conversation now, with a human translator who understood their language of connection, persistence, and renewal. The silent spring finder had given voice to the desert's deepest secret. Beneath every barren surface, possibilities await for those patient enough to listen.